I'm Bernina expert Amanda Murphy, and this is month 6 of the BERNINA 125th Anniversary Quilt-along. This month, I'd like to show you some highlights from my quilting process. I began by doing all the in-the-ditch quilting using a straight line ruler. This includes quilting around the entire octagonal framework. Here I'm quilting on a BERNINA Longarm, but you can also quilt on a domestic machine with a ruler using the number 72 BERNINA adjustable ruler foot. You'll note that I'm holding my ruler so that the ruler's edge is a 1/4 inch away from the seam upon which I would like to stitch. Here I'm using a ruler to quilt around the embroidery in the borders. You can use a ruler and quilt a circle around these motifs, or you can just free motion quilt closely following the edge of the motif. I did that with the paisleys here. On the original quilt, I actually did that around the circles too, so it's really your choice. I'm going to free motion just a bit to get to the second paisley so that I don't have to end my threads unnecessarily. I also used a straight line ruler to go around the cornerstone blocks. After quilting around these blocks, I then switched back to free motion quilting and traveled toward the embroidered motif. I used a ruler to go around the embroidered motif, but you could just as easily free motion quilt around it. After going around the ruler, I then filled in the background with a little stipple. Next up were the blocks themselves, so I used the line on the ruler, shown here, to line up with my desired stitch line to make sure my placement was correct, and I stitched right down the ruler. Here I'm using the ruler for some simple back and forth quilting. If you're quilting on a domestic machine, I have some great tips in the BERNINA Ruler Work Sampler that I did for them earlier this year. It's a little different how you hold the ruler when you're moving on a domestic machine because of course you're holding the fabric as well. I used a ruler, a small circle, to quilt little arcs and connect corners of blocks. These blocks were only 6 inches big, so a small circle ruler was perfect. And frequently, here you can see here I'm using the ruler for in the ditch work, but I frequently switch from ruler work to free motion as I'm quilting, which means I'm using my ruler work foot to free motion. The BERNINA Q24 and Q20, when mounted on the frame, have adjustable handles, and that lets me easily lower both handles to switch to free motion. There's just a little stipple fill here. When quilting the motifs in the borders, I use the seam lines to mark the placement for the trapezoid and triangle motifs. Now, I was on the Q24, so I was able to use the digitized motifs that are available as part of the Jubilee 125th Anniversary Embroidery Collection. And you can see here the placement marks that I used. But I kept these motifs simple because I also wanted you to be able to use rulers making them. Here are some digitized designs that are optional. I chose to incorporate them in my quilt. They are in the same embroidery collection. But if you'd rather skip that, you can just fill in the rest of the border with a free motion fill, and it will look excellent right up against those straight ruler work lines because contrast is really what makes this quilt interesting. So here are some other digitized designs. These designs, I should say, are digitized both for long arms and for domestic embroidery machines. And after I did all the digitized motifs, I went back and lowered both handles and switched to free motion and filled in the blank spaces with a small paisley fill. This is one of my favorite fills. It's so forgiving. It's a little more interesting than stippling, I think, to do. And I love the texture it creates. So here I am filling this space also with the paisley fill. But really, if you wanted to, you could also meander in here or do loops or any kind of dense organic design that will contrast with the straight line quilting. And as I said, you can easily execute those straight line quilting lines with rulers. There's nothing I enjoy more than a free motion quilt fill. And here's the results. So I hope you have enjoyed stitching along with us. Happy anniversary, Bernina.